Hey, this is Rachel Hatfield, and I'm here with Sean Roye, and we are going to talk a little bit about a health journey that he's been on. He's a pharmacist, been a pharmacist for about 8 years, and kind of stumbled across some pretty intense um, physical issues that has led him on this health journey that he has changed a lot of his behaviors and been able to increase and incorporate some diet and exercise to help him feel more energetic and try to heal his body through a pretty amazing experience that he's been dealing with. So I'm going to let him kind of talk a little bit about kind of what he's doing and where he's at and where he's going. So, hey, thanks for being with me, Sean.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a inpatient pharmacist. Went through, all that, and after I got out of school, was diagnosed with lupus, and that's where this all started. Uh, one of the biggest things with lupus is chronic fatigue syndrome, which is, common with a lot of other conditions as well. So that was kind of one of my biggest struggles. And so that's kind of what led me to where I am now. And where I am now is an obsessed runner, and just really not somewhere I would have thought I would have been, had you talked to me leaving high school or something like that. So it's been quite the journey.
So tell me a little bit about chronic fatigue syndrome and what that means.
Yeah, so part of lupus and a lot of autoimmunes, especially, your body is constantly in some kind of state of inflammation. Um, Sometimes it's more severe than others, but that inflammation and the processes that go with that really just tired. I was in my late 20s, had really started my career, which I was a retail pharmacist at that point, so long days, high stress environment did not help. But and I was just dragging. It's like you're supposed to be hitting your prime in your 30s, and I was just waiting for the next nap, waiting for the next day off to try to recuperate enough to go into work. Not really what you picture when you graduate and start your life.
Yeah. So it was exhausting all the time, feeling like you just needed to sleep.
Yeah.
Did you have any
And it just,
pain with it?
yeah, my biggest symptoms and what put me into the doctor to start the journey of diagnosis was joint pain. One day it would be my hips, the next day it would be my hands. There was no rhyme or reason to it. But when it started hitting the hips with some regularity, it would, that really affected work. And that was when I was like, I've got to figure out what's going on. And luckily, I got with a primary care physician who had just kind of finished up residencies and had been with a rheumatologist. And so it was fresh on his mind. And I've always said that was a God thing because he went straight to lupus and ran all the tests. And instead of a lot of people have a very long journey to get diagnosis.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty great connection that you had there. Someone that was familiar with this, and for them to be right. I mean, and not have to spend so much time diagnostic testing and stuff. So that's a little bit about how you started out. Tell us about how the journey has been.
Yeah. So that was early 2013 when I got the diagnosis. Got on some medication that did help with the joint pain symptoms. It didn't seem to help much with the fatigue. And so I was kind of muddling through, trying to just force my way through life. And anytime I went to my rheumatologist, my complaint was I'm tired. And his answer was, that's life. That's your life now. And that was rough. Maybe if you're in your 70s or 80s, his normal patient, that might be kind of a little bit more acceptable. But at 30, I was not okay with that. And so that was frustrating. And so I can remember, March 2nd, 2016, I I just, like, over the past couple of days leading up to that, I'd really felt a very spiritual tug to run. I'm not a runner. You've known me quite a while. I'm not ever been a runner. You know, I was an offensive lineman in high school. I didn't like to run at all. And so, like, I really kind of struggled with that. I was like, okay, whatever, throw on a pair of tennis shoes. And, you know, my first run, I looked back this morning at it because I have all my runs saved, was 1.6 miles in like 35 minutes. So it was basically a walk.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started.
That's about what I do, a lot slower than that. I'm like an hour for, I'm not a runner either, but I've felt kind of that tug too. I just haven't been able to get in there and get that done. I think that for what you're telling me though, because I remember that time whenever you were talking about these answers that you were getting from these doctors and how disappointing that was, about how they're saying, well, this is your life. This is what you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. And you're just going to have to accept it. I remember that time and how disappointing that was for you and for everyone, thinking, oh my gosh, what does this mean for him? He's in his 30s. I mean, he's just now starting out his life. So I couldn't imagine getting that. But you, it sounds like, are resilient and a fighter and like, I'm not going to accept that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all have a choice, you know, and our mind, in my opinion, is a lot stronger than we give it credit for a lot of the time. And so, and for me, it is a God journey. It's always been a spiritual thing. Um, and so you know, I did that 1.6 miles, and, you know, whatever. I didn't run the whole thing. I was out of breath. I was like, yeah, this is terrible. Typical response to running. But I was listening to my Bible when I did it, and so the next day I did it again, and it was still terrible. But I think the second day was when some scripture came through. It's Second Chronicles, and it talks about 2015 is the actual verse, but talks about the Jews were facing an army 2 or 3 times their size. Death was the only option if they went out to face them, and they were told, "This is God's battle, not yours." But they were also told in the next verse that you have to march out, meet this army, so face your fear, basically, and watch God's victory. And so when that hit me, that's where the his battle running came from. Um, that's where it all, you know, like, really kind of became a spiritual journey for me. So it, you know, the running is my march. The running is facing my fears. I'm supposed to rest. I'm supposed to take it easy. I'm supposed to not be physically active especially something high impact like running. And instead, I go out and face that. So that's been my journey and the God link to it all.
So what do you mean by you are supposed to not do any type of physical impact like that? Is that what the recommendations are?
Yeah, with the joint pain and stuff, you'll see a lot of recommendations to be physical active, but like low impact stuff,
Okay.
swimming, maybe like bike, elliptical, that kind of stuff, and just take it easy. When you're tired, take it easy. And
Mhm.
as you know, I do the opposite. The more tired I am, the worse I feel, the harder I push myself. Um, and so it's just really, for me, it's that mental aspect of when things are rough. I mean, I don't push myself to a dangerous point, but when things are rough, I'm just going to go a little bit harder because there's more there than you're aware of. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the running journey started in 2016.
So I hear a little bit of that mental stuff that you're talking about, with you are trying to overcome and not let the mental part drag it down more. Because if you
Yeah,
let your mind think in that fear based, right? Like, don't face those fears, and you think in that way, then you're going to restrict yourself more subconsciously. Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. You know, and especially with any kind of disease state, whether it be diabetes, you know, cancer or whatever, you have to be within reason. But I think you can make yourself worse by being sedentary. We weren't created to be sedentary. There's study after study after study showing that we were made to move. Um, as far as the animal kingdom goes, we have the best endurance of any living creature, and there's a reason for that. We were built for this, some kind of movement. And so, yeah, I think you can make a lot of disease states worse by just sitting down, not to mention the mental health aspect of inactivity and the benefit that exercise, aerobic exercise, has for mental health. So,
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm sure you've experienced some of that too with the
yeah,
serotonin and exercise and running.
yeah, I mean, everybody's, well, maybe not everybody, but most people have heard of the runner's high. That's not something that's made up.
Right.
But we know, from science that that's endorphins, that's neurotransmitters, that's stuff that our body is releasing. But at a greater aspect, I've read studies, I've really delved into running as a passion now, but there are rehabs across the country that use running as part of their rehab program when people are coming off of drugs and alcohol. There are therapists across the nation. I'm sure you've seen this, that do running sessions. There is an aspect of cardio. It doesn't have to be running, because some people can't go out and run, but there's an aspect of that cardio, the elevated heart rate, the physical things, that is just a positive. You can take, and a lot of people, and now that I'm connected into the runner's world, there are so many people using running to fight anxiety, depression, just to survive the stress of their job. You can really go out and run off a lot of that stress, or bike off, or swim, whatever your thing is. It doesn't have to be running. It's just, mine is. So
Yeah. And like you said, within reason, you want to make sure that you're healthy and you're under the guidance of a primary care physician. Make sure that you're physically healthy and mentally healthy. You also, in this situation, in my undergrad studies, some of the research that I had done talked about how just jogging was almost better at times than taking a specific antidepressant, with the amount of dopamine and chemicals and neurotransmitters that it actually help to absorb, all of those chemicals to help us feel more balanced and less stressed. It was one of the best stress relievers. So I totally think there's so much science out there that supports what you're talking about. And I can see how passionate you are about that with all of your posts that you have. So tell us a little bit about his battle stuff. I see you have hats and you have all kinds of things that you kind of support that idea. And it sounds like you're just kind of advocating for this.
yeah, and I've got a Facebook page. It's kind of been inactive, and I'm working on getting that going again. But I do the hats and the shirts are reminders for me, but they're also talking points. When I'm at a race or at a running function and I have that stuff on, you'll get questions, and it is absolutely my passion, and I think we can all gain something from some physical activity. And I think some of us probably will go off the deep end, like I have, into an obsession with it. And it's just, I've heard people say that they've replaced their addiction for drugs with running. But that's a pretty good switch off in the end. Something that is very healthy. And so, yeah, his battle is just something that I've wanted to get off the ground, and I've struggled with that, just with everything, but it's something I'm still pursuing. I still get hits on my page from random people. So yeah, it's sharing God's word through myself, but then also just sharing the benefit of physical activity.
Yeah.
Now that running is a part of my life, on a daily or close to daily basis, you go 3 or 4 days without running, and you can feel a funk. So what you were saying about the antidepressants and stuff, it's definitely a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And having a bad day, the best thing for me to do is to throw on shoes and go. And you can definitely get away. And it's a great meditation time too. So it has tons of benefits that way. And any cardiovascular type stuff could, biking, whatever, could do the same.
Yeah. So I will definitely post a link to your Facebook page below for anyone who wants any type of more information about your mission on that, because I think that would be very helpful for them. What about people who are just starting out in this area of running, and maybe if they're having some chronic fatigue? What would be your um, suggestions to them?
Yeah, first and foremost, get cleared by your doctor. Every time I undertake a big endeavor, I double check with my doctor, which at this point she just laughs and says, "Do whatever." But so check with your doctor, but then baby steps. I, and that's the reason I brought up the 1.6 miles in 30 something minutes. Basically, it was a walk with a few little short jogs in there, because now it's, here we're in May, so we're about 4 years and 2 months ish. And I looked this morning, I'm at about 4,600 miles, lifetime miles. Um,
That's amazing.
I've
That is
Yeah,
amazing.
I've ran 2 marathons, tons of smaller races. So yeah, baby steps. It doesn't get there overnight. You're not the fastest person ever. There's always someone faster, someone younger. Um, but just take it easy. Shoes are super important. That seems silly, but go to a running store, get fitted for the right shoes, and then just start. I think the reason running stuck where other activities had never stuck with me is I literally can put on a pair of shoes and walk out the door. You don't have to drive to the gym. You don't have to go anywhere. You can put on a pair of shoes and run around the block, run down the road. With the coronavirus and everything going on, my last marathon was canceled, so I ran from a town 26 miles from here and ran home. So I drove over there and ran home. So stashed some water on the side of the road and did my own marathon because I'd been training for it and didn't want to waste all that time training. So it's easy.
Yeah. It sounds like it. Sounds like it's very hard, but it's easy access, right? You've
Yeah,
worked so hard.
it's easy to build that habit.
Yes.
And and there's one reason I use the same tracking app is because I can go back and remind myself where I started. um and in my first year, I think I did 500ish miles from March to December. And then my next year I broke 1,000, just barely. The next year was another 1,000. Last year was 1,400 and something. And this year, I don't know. It's going to be well over 1,500. I'm already almost 700 in for this year. So it's a gradual build up, and maybe you never get to this level, but 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is the recommendation. There's a reason for that. It helps a lot.
So whether it's running or any type of cardio um, workout, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is recommended.
I think that's kind of like the minimum.
Yeah.
If it's a low impact cardio, you can do it every day. Running is considered a high impact thing. So, most people, now there are people out there that are on what we call running streaks that have ran for years without ever missing a day. But it's pretty high impact. So for me, especially, I need a day here or there to rest body parts and just take away some of that impact. But yeah.
What are some of the risks that people face if they start running?
Uh, I think the number is 80% of runners get injured within the first couple of years, and they're usually small things. The ones that everybody's heard of is plantar fasciitis. There's IT band syndrome. It's usually overuse injuries. It's not usually like major life-changing injuries. It's just usually overwork stuff, tendonitis, little stuff we call niggles. They just little hit and miss stuff that comes and goes. And that's where they take it easy. They once you get into it and you kind of get to where you're running some, the Couch to 5K programs are great starters because they baby you into walking and running and then get you to full on running. Um, and of course, walking is never not allowed. Some people think you must run the whole time, but if you get there, you get there. Um, and I've mentioned races. I use them as motivation and as benchmarks. I know runners that never race, never will race. They have no desire to race, but they're great social gatherings of other people. And, there are people at the front that are insanely fast, and there are people at the back that just are out there to do the social aspect and to finish. So I think that's a huge benefit to that community of people, and you get to where people at your local running scene, and it's just you make friends that way too. So all of it kind of builds into the mental health aspect.
Yeah, so you can get a community out of this, get some physical exercise, and help yourself mentally and physically and socially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
When, when,
and it doesn't matter if the person is at the last or the front, they're all part of that community and they're still in it together.
Absolutely. And in the running community as a whole, there's always exceptions, but the running community as a whole is incredibly supportive. And there's something to be said. I ran a marathon in just under 4 hours. The elites run them in 2 hours, but there are people that are out there for 6+ hours. Really that's a physical feat in and of itself just to be out there that long. Hours after the elite runners have quit, they've showered, they've rested,
Yeah.
these people are still out there hammering along. So in some ways, that's just as big of an accomplishment as the fastest person. Like I can't imagine being on my feet for 7 hours to finish something and being out there towards the back of the pack. So I had super big respect for that. And I think most races and community type stuff, you'll see a ton of support for those guys.
Awesome. So it doesn't matter if people are just starting out, they're gonna be able to get that support from that. So that's
I think
pretty
so,
amazing
yeah.
how many benefits there are connected to this. So yeah.
Agree.
What are your favorite memories related to this?
Um, Man, there's a ton of them. The Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon was my first marathon, and it went terribly. I got cramps at like mile 15 and made a decision at mile 15 that I was going to finish, even though all my goals were out the window and I was in pain. But crossing the finish line and my boys seeing me and seeing the fact that I didn't quit, that's a huge one. And running has this weird way of the worst run in the world. When you get done with it, it almost like your brain just almost erases all the bad. So like I can talk about Oklahoma City and you would be like, that sounds horrible. And I'm like, yeah, it's the best race ever. So that's an added benefit. You kind of get that amnesia towards those bad moments. But that was a great one. I've won a couple of local races. I'm not fast at all, but the right race with the right people in it. And so those are always fun. But just getting out there, um, that that community is fantastic. My boys both run some with me, and those are great memories when we can go out for a short run together.
Yeah. So your boys are active in running too.
Yeah, yeah. To lesser extents, but they both see me doing it, and so when they ask to go, absolutely we go, and we do tons of hiking and we just try to stay active and help with their mental health and any things that they come up, any struggles they have.
How old are they?
8 and 9.
8 and 9. Mine too. So, well, 7 and 8. So they're right there along the same side. So,
Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny that you said about forgetting all the bad. It kind of reminds me of childbirth because I wonder how much of that has to do with all of that adrenaline and everything that gets going. Because women say that all the time. Like, it was a horrible experience, but I can't remember any of it except for the wonderful ending and how wonderful it was. They
Yeah,
remember the pain, but they don't remember it internally like normal. So,
yeah. I think we're probably designed that way.
yeah,
Um,
that's pretty cool. How much how resilient our bodies are, and how we're wired and designed for overcoming things like that. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about any resources that you feel like was super helpful for you getting started on this journey.
Yeah, I mean, getting started, I didn't have a whole lot except my local running store. You know, typically there's some run junkies in those stores that are more than happy to talk about it. That's the one thing about runners is we're more than happy to tell you we're a runner. And then online, there are a lot of, obviously there are a lot of communities, but there are some really good ones. It doesn't take much looking to find some really supportive ones on Facebook, obviously, and Reddit has a great running community as well, where questions can be asked and just knowledge can be imparted from people, you know, because there's running encompasses 5K, you know, weekend racers to 200-mile ultra runners and everybody in between. So there's a ton of people out there.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like a really huge community for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So guys, if you like this video, please remember to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button and that notification bell, and we'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.